In a small, sleepy town surrounded by lush green hills and thick woods, there lived a woman named Clara Bennett. Clara was in her early 30s, with soft brown hair that framed her gentle face and eyes that always seemed to carry a hint of sadness. She had grown up in this quiet place where everyone knew each other's names and life moved at a slow, predictable pace. But for Clara, the past 2 years had been anything but peaceful. Her mother, Evelyn, had passed away suddenly, leaving behind a void that no amount of time seemed able to fill. Evelyn had been the heart of their family, kind, lively, and full of stories about their ancestors. She was someone who could light up any room she walked into, and her death had shocked not just Clara but the entire town. The doctors had called it natural causes, explaining that sometimes even healthy people can succumb to unforeseen health issues. But Clara couldn't shake off the feeling that something wasn't right. Her mother had been strong, active, and brimming with energy until the very last days of her life. How could natural causes explain such an abrupt end? Clara tried to push these thoughts aside, telling herself that grief was making her overthink things. She buried herself in work, helping out at the local library where she had spent many afternoons as a child reading books alongside her mother. But no matter how hard she tried to move on, the questions kept nagging at her. Why had her mother looked so worried in the weeks leading up to her death? What was that strange phone call she had taken one evening, after which she became unusually quiet? And why did some of their neighbors seem reluctant to talk about Evelyn now? One rainy afternoon, while sorting through old boxes in the attic, Clara stumbled upon something that would change everything. The attic was cluttered with forgotten treasures, old photo albums, dusty knickknacks, and piles of letters tied together with faded ribbons. As she sifted through them, she noticed a worn, leather-bound journal tucked under a stack of blankets. It belonged to her mother, its cover cracked with age. Curious, Clara opened it and began flipping through the pages. Most of the entries were typical musings about daily life, but toward the back she found something unusual. Tucked inside the journal was a folded piece of paper, yellowed with time. Clara carefully unfolded it and saw that it contained only a single line written in her mother's neat handwriting. "If anything happens to me, look beneath where I rest." The words sent a shiver down her spine. Was this a message meant for her, or perhaps a warning? Whatever it was, it felt like a puzzle waiting to be solved. Clara sat cross-legged on the attic floor, staring at the note for what felt like hours. Her mind raced with possibilities. Could her mother have known that something bad was going to happen? If so, why hadn't she said anything outright? The more Clara thought about it, the more convinced she became that this cryptic message held the key to understanding her mother's mysterious death. The next few days were a blur of emotions. Clara debated whether she should share the note with someone else, maybe Sarah, her best friend since childhood. But deep down, she knew that no one would take her seriously. People already thought she was struggling to cope with her loss. Bringing up a vague note from her mother's journal would only make them worry more. Besides, this felt personal, like a task her mother had entrusted solely to her. Determined to get answers, Clara started researching how one might legally exhume a grave. She learned quickly that it wasn't easy. There were forms to fill out, permissions to obtain, and countless bureaucratic hurdles to clear. Every official she approached either dismissed her concerns or outright refused to help. Some even suggested that she was letting her grief cloud her judgment. But Clara didn't care. She couldn't ignore the voice in her head telling her that the truth lay buried alongside her mother. As days turned into weeks, Clara grew increasingly frustrated. She realized that if she wanted answers, she'd have to take matters into her own hands. Late one night, when the town was asleep and the streets were empty, she grabbed a flashlight, a sturdy shovel, and her raincoat. Her heart pounded as she made her way to the cemetery, the cold wind biting at her cheeks. The moon hung low in the sky, casting eerie shadows across the rows of headstones. Standing before her mother's grave, Clara hesitated. This was sacred ground, a place meant for peace and remembrance. Digging it up felt wrong, almost sacrilegious. But the thought of her mother lying there with secrets still hidden gave her the strength to push forward. With trembling hands, she plunged the shovel into the damp earth and began to dig. Each thrust of the shovel brought her closer to the truth, and farther from the comfort of normalcy. Dirt clung to her gloves and sweat trickled down her forehead despite the chill in the air. Memories of her mother flooded her mind. The sound of her laughter, the warmth of her hugs, the way she used to hum while cooking dinner. These thoughts, both comforted and tormented Clara, fueling her determination to keep going. Hours passed, and the hole grew deeper. Just as exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her, the tip of the shovel struck something solid. Her breath caught in her throat. Slowly, she brushed away the remaining soil, revealing the wooden lid of the coffin. For a moment she froze, unsure if she was ready for what lay beneath. But then she reminded herself why she was doing this, to honor her mother's memory and uncover the truth. With great effort, Clara pried open the casket, steeling herself for what she might find. The sight of her mother's remains was heartbreaking, but it wasn't what caught her attention. Nestled beside the body was a small, intricately carved wooden box sealed tightly with wax. It looked ancient, like something out of a fairy tale. Carefully, Clara lifted it out of the coffin and examined it under the dim glow of her flashlight. Her hands trembled as she broke the seal and opened the box. Inside, she found a bundle of handwritten pages bound together like a journal. Flipping through them, she realized they were filled with her mother's familiar handwriting. Each page hinted at secrets far darker than she could have imagined. By the time she finished skimming the first few entries, Clara knew one thing. For certain, her mother's death was no accident. Someone had wanted her silenced, and Clara was determined to find out who. Clara's decision to dig up her mother's grave didn't come without consequences. Word spread quickly in the small town, where secrets were hard to keep, and gossip traveled faster than wildfire. By the next morning, everyone seemed to know what she had done, or at least suspected it. Whispers followed her wherever she went, and the once friendly faces of neighbors turned cold and judgmental. Some shook their heads in disapproval, while others outright confronted her, calling her actions disrespectful and unnatural. At first, Clara tried to ignore the backlash. She told herself that their opinions didn't matter. All that mattered was finding the truth about her mother's death. But as the days passed, the pressure mounted. Even Sarah, her closest friend since childhood, couldn't understand why. Clara was risking so much for something that seemed impossible to prove. One evening, over a cup of tea at Clara's house, Sarah finally voiced her concerns. "Clara, I know you miss your mom," Sarah said gently, her voice tinged with worry. "But digging up her grave? That's extreme. Maybe it's time to let go. You can't bring her back." Clara sighed, setting down her teacup. She wanted to explain how important this was to her, but she knew Sarah wouldn't fully grasp the weight of what she'd discovered. The journal entries hinted at secrets far bigger than either of them could imagine. Yet when she looked into Sarah's concerned eyes, Clara felt a pang of doubt creep in. Was she being reckless? Or worse, was she losing her grip on reality? The criticism wasn't limited to friends and neighbors. Local authorities soon got involved, issuing warnings that exhuming a grave without proper permission was illegal. A stern-looking police officer visited Clara one afternoon, his tone firm but not unkind. "Miss Bennett," he began, "we understand. You're grieving, but tampering with burial sites is against the law. If you persist, we'll have no choice but to take action." Clara nodded politely, promising to cooperate. But inside, she felt trapped. She knew they wouldn't believe her if she told them about the journal or the cryptic note. To them, she was just a grieving daughter unable to move on. The thought of giving up crossed her mind briefly, but then she remembered the look in her mother's eyes during those final weeks, the fear, the urgency. Something had been weighing heavily on Evelyn's mind, and Clara couldn't abandon her now. Determined to continue her investigation, Clara decided to seek legal permission to reopen the grave officially. She spent hours filling out forms, gathering documentation, and meeting with officials who held the power to grant her request. Each step felt like climbing an endless mountain. Bureaucracy moved at a snail's pace, and every answer led to more questions. Frustrated but unwilling to give up, Clara pressed on, even when it felt like the entire world was working against her. Her persistence only fueled the rumors swirling around town. Some accused her of seeking attention, while others whispered that she might be mentally unstable. The local church pastor, Reverend Grayson, paid her a visit one Sunday afternoon. He was a kind man with graying hair and a soothing voice, but his words carried a warning. "Clara," he said, sitting across from her in her modest living room, "I want to support you in your grief, but I must caution you. Disturbing the resting place of the departed is considered taboo for a reason. It disrupts the peace of the soul and invites turmoil into our lives. Have you considered the spiritual implications of what you're doing?" Clara listened patiently, nodding occasionally, but her resolve remained unshaken. "Reverend," she replied softly, "I respect your beliefs, but my mother left me a message. She wanted me to find something. How can I ignore that?" The Reverend sighed, shaking his head. "Just tread carefully, my child. Not everything is meant to be uncovered." Despite the warnings and obstacles, Clara refused to back down. Every setback only strengthened her determination. Late at night, when the house was quiet and the world outside lay still, she would sit by the window, staring at the stars and replaying her mother's final days in her mind. There had to be a reason Evelyn had gone to such lengths to leave her a clue. Whatever it was, Clara owed it to her mother and to herself to see it through. One evening, as she flipped through the journal again, she noticed something she hadn't seen before. Hidden beneath a loose page was another note, smaller and more fragile than the first. Written in Evelyn's handwriting were 3 simple words: "Follow the path." At first glance it seemed vague, almost poetic. But as Clara traced the letters with her finger, a memory surfaced. A conversation she'd had with her mother years ago about a hidden trail behind their property that led deep into the woods. Could this be the path Evelyn was referring to? Clara's heart raced with excitement. She grabbed a flashlight and headed outside, determined to follow the lead. The trail was overgrown and barely visible now, swallowed by time and nature. Branches snagged at her clothes, and the earth beneath her feet was uneven, but she pushed forward, driven by a mix of hope and desperation. After walking for what felt like miles, Clara reached a clearing she didn't recognize. In the center stood an old, weathered cabin, its wooden walls warped and splintered with age. Her breath caught in her throat. This had to be significant. Why else would the trail lead here? She approached cautiously, her flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The door creaked open with a groan, revealing a dusty interior filled with cobwebs and forgotten relics. As Clara stepped inside, she felt a strange sense of familiarity, as though her mother's presence lingered in the air. On a rickety table, near the far wall, she spotted a small metal box partially hidden under a pile of yellowed papers. Her hands trembled as she picked it up, examining it closely. Unlike the wooden box from the grave, this one was locked, its surface etched with intricate designs that reminded her of family heirlooms she'd seen in old photographs. Clara's mind buzzed with possibilities. What could be inside? Another piece of the puzzle? Or perhaps the key to unlocking the mystery entirely? She tucked the box under her arm and hurried home, her heart pounding with anticipation. For the first time since her mother's death, she felt like she was getting closer to the truth. But as she lay in bed that night, clutching the box to her chest, a new wave of fear washed over her. The deeper she dug, the more dangerous things seemed to become. Anonymous notes had started appearing. On her doorstep, scrawled in blocky handwriting, "Stop asking questions." Her car tires had been slashed twice in the past week, and shadowy figures lurked near her house late at night. Someone clearly didn't want her to uncover the truth, and they were willing to do whatever it took to stop her. Yet, despite the growing danger, Clara couldn't turn back. She had come too far to give up now. Her mother had trusted her with this mission, and she wouldn't let anything, or anyone, stand in her way. The metal box Clara had found in the old cabin sat on her kitchen table, its intricate designs catching the light as she turned it over in her hands. It was small enough to fit in her palm, yet it felt heavy with significance. The lock was rusted and stubborn, refusing to budge no matter how much she jiggled or twisted it. Frustrated but undeterred, Clara rummaged through drawers until she found an old butter knife. Carefully, she wedged it into the seam of the box and applied pressure. With a soft click, the lock gave way, and the lid popped open. Inside, she discovered a bundle of documents tied together with a faded ribbon. Her heart raced as she untied the knot and began sifting through the pages. They were filled with her mother's handwriting, notes, sketches, and lists that hinted at something far bigger than Clara had imagined. One page detailed transactions involving large sums of money, while another listed names of people Clara vaguely recognized, prominent figures in the town, including the mayor, Richard Alden, and several wealthy landowners. As she read further, the pieces started to come together. Evelyn had uncovered evidence of corruption, a web of illegal land deals, embezzlement, and even extortion. According to the notes, these powerful individuals had been using their influence to seize properties from unsuspecting families, often forcing them out under false pretenses. Some entries mentioned threats and intimidation tactics used to silence anyone who dared to speak out. Clara's stomach churned as she realized just how dangerous this information could be. But what shocked her most was a section near the end of the journal. Here, Evelyn wrote about being approached by someone within the group, offering her hush money in exchange for her silence. When she refused, the tone of the entries shifted. Evelyn described feeling watched, receiving anonymous calls late at night, and finding strange marks on her car. In one chilling entry, she wrote, "They think I don't know who they are, but I do. If anything happens to me, trust no one." Clara's hands trembled as she flipped to the final page. It was addressed directly to her, written in her mother's unmistakable script. "My dearest Clara, if you're reading this, it means my fears have come true. Someone wanted me silenced because I knew too much. These papers hold proof of crimes committed by people we've trusted our whole lives. But beware, they will stop at nothing to protect their secrets. Find the key. It's hidden where we used to dream together. Remember, trust your instincts and don't let them scare you into silence. I love you more than words can say. Mom." Tears blurred Clara's vision as she reread the letter. Her mother hadn't died of natural causes. She'd been murdered to keep her quiet. And now, Clara was holding the evidence that could bring down some of the most powerful people in town. But what did Evelyn mean by the key? Where was it hidden? The phrase, "where we used to dream together," echoed in her mind, stirring memories of lazy summer afternoons spent lying in the grass behind their house, staring up at the clouds. Clara grabbed her coat and headed outside, retracing the path to the spot she and her mother had loved so much. The field was overgrown now, the tall grass swaying gently in the breeze. She walked slowly, scanning the ground for anything unusual. Near the base of an ancient oak tree, she noticed something glinting in the sunlight. Dropping to her knees, she brushed away the dirt and uncovered a small tin buried just beneath the surface. Her pulse quickened as she opened the tin. Inside was a single brass key attached to a tag engraved with the words, "For Clara." Holding it in her hand, she felt a surge of emotion. Pride, fear, and an overwhelming sense of responsibility. This key had to unlock something important. But what? Evelyn's message hadn't specified, leaving Clara to piece together the next step. Over the next few days, Clara pored over the documents again, searching for any clue that might point to where the key belonged. One name kept appearing repeatedly: Hargrove. Mr. Hargrove was an elderly man who lived on the outskirts of town, known for his reclusive nature and sharp memory. Clara decided to pay him a visit, hoping he might shed some light on the mystery. When she arrived at his modest home, Mr. Hargrove greeted her with a wary smile. He was frail but alert, his piercing blue eyes studying her intently. After explaining her situation and showing him the journal, Clara asked if he knew anything about the key or the events surrounding her mother's death. Mr. Hargrove hesitated before speaking, his voice low and measured. "Your mother was a Brave woman, Clara. She came to me once asking questions about certain dealings in town. I told her what little I knew, but I warned her to tread carefully. Those people don't take kindly to interference. Do you know what this key unlocks? Clara pressed, holding it up for him to see. He frowned, leaning closer to examine it. Then his expression changed, recognition flickering across his face. That looks like the key to the old storage unit downtown, he said slowly. It belonged to your grandfather years ago. He used it to store family heirlooms and important documents. If your mother hid something valuable, that's where I'd start looking. Clara thanked him profusely and hurried back into town, her mind racing. The storage facility was located in a run-down part of the district, its faded sign barely legible. As she approached, she noticed a black sedan parked nearby, its windows tinted. A man sat inside, watching her intently. Her skin prickled with unease, but she forced herself to stay calm. Whoever was following her clearly knew she was onto something. Inside the storage facility, Clara located the unit marked with her grandfather's name. Her hands shook as she inserted the key into the lock and turned it. The door creaked open, revealing a dimly lit space filled with dusty furniture, boxes, and shelves. At first glance, it seemed like nothing more than a forgotten collection of odds and ends. But then she spotted it, a metal chest tucked beneath a pile of blankets in the corner. Her breath caught in her throat as she dragged the chest into the light. It was heavier than she expected, its surface engraved with the same intricate patterns as the smaller box she'd found earlier. Using the key, she unlocked it and lifted the lid. Inside, she found stacks of official documents, photographs, and recordings, all damning evidence of the conspiracy Evelyn had uncovered. Among the items was a cassette tape labeled simply, "Insurance." Clara's fingers trembled as she inserted it into an old player she found among the belongings. Her mother's voice filled the room, calm but resolute. "This is Evelyn Bennett. If you're hearing this, it means I'm no longer able to speak for myself. What you're about to hear is proof of crimes committed by individuals who believe they are above the law. Share this with anyone you trust, but be careful. They will try to stop you." The recording went on to detail meetings, bribes, and threats, naming names and providing dates. By the time it ended, Clara felt both empowered and terrified. She now held the tools to expose the truth, but doing so would put her directly in the crosshairs of those responsible for her mother's death. As she packed up the evidence and prepared to leave, Clara glanced out the window and saw the black sedan still parked outside. The man inside was talking on a phone, his gaze fixed on her. For a moment, panic gripped her, but then she remembered her mother's words. Trust your instincts, and don't let them scare you into silence. Clutching the chest tightly, Clara took a deep breath and stepped out into the fading daylight. Whatever happened next, she knew one thing for certain. She wouldn't stop until justice was served. For her mother, for herself, and for everyone else who had been wronged. Clara stepped out of the storage unit, her arms wrapped tightly around the metal chest containing the evidence that could blow the lid off decades of corruption. The weight of it was both literal and figurative. It wasn't just documents and recordings. It was proof of a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of power in her small town. As she locked the storage unit behind her, she glanced toward the black sedan parked across the street. The man inside was still watching her, his expression unreadable but undeniably menacing. Her heart pounded as she walked briskly to her car, trying to appear calm despite the storm brewing inside her. She couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. Whoever these people were, they already knew she was onto something, and they weren't going to let her expose them without a fight. But Clara refused to back down. Her mother had risked everything to uncover the truth, and now it was her turn to carry the torch. Sitting in her car, Clara took a moment to gather her thoughts. She needed a plan, someone she could trust to help her navigate what came next. Sarah, her best friend, immediately crossed her mind, but Clara hesitated. Sarah had been supportive in the past, but this was different. This wasn't just about grieving or closure anymore. It was dangerous territory. Could she really ask Sarah to put herself in harm's way? Then there was Mr. Hargrove, the elderly man who'd pointed her toward the storage unit. He seemed knowledgeable about the town's history and clearly respected her mother, but he was frail and likely wouldn't be able to offer much practical assistance. Still, Clara decided to pay him another visit. If nothing else, he might have advice on how to proceed safely. The drive to Mr. Hargrove's house felt longer than usual, every shadowy figure along the road making her grip the steering wheel tighter. When she arrived, he greeted her with the same wary smile as before, though his eyes widened slightly when he saw the metal chest in her arms. "What did you find?" he asked, ushering her inside. Clara hesitated for a moment, then opened the chest and showed him its contents. His face paled as he flipped through the documents and listened to snippets of the cassette tape. This is explosive," he murmured, shaking his head. "Your mother truly went above and beyond to ensure the truth would come out." "She gave her life for this," Clara said softly, tears welling up in her eyes. "And I can't let her sacrifice be in vain." Mr. Hargrove nodded solemnly. "You're right, but you need to understand something. These people don't play fair. They'll do whatever it takes to protect themselves, even if it means silencing you permanently." "I know," Clara replied firmly, "but I'm not backing down. I just need to figure out how to get this information out without putting myself or anyone else in more danger." After some thought, Mr. Hargrove suggested reaching out to someone outside the town, a journalist from a nearby city who specialized in investigative reporting. "Find someone trustworthy, someone who won't be swayed by local influence," he advised. "They'll have the resources to dig deeper and the platform to make sure the truth gets heard." Clara left Mr. Hargrove's house feeling cautiously hopeful. That night she scoured the internet for journalists known for exposing corruption. After hours of research, she settled on Rachel Monroe, an award-winning reporter whose work had uncovered scandals involving politicians and corporate giants. Clara drafted a carefully worded email, attaching scanned copies of some of the most damning documents and explaining the situation as concisely as possible. She ended the message with a plea. "Please help me finish what my mother started." To her relief, Rachel responded within hours, expressing interest in the story and asking for more details. Over the next few days, Clara worked closely with Rachel, sharing everything she discovered while taking precautions to stay safe. She communicated only through encrypted messages and avoided mentioning specifics over the phone, knowing her calls could be monitored. As the investigation gained momentum, Clara noticed subtle changes in her surroundings. Her car tires were slashed again, and strange noises echoed outside her house late at night. One morning, she found a note taped to her front door. "You've made your point. Walk away while you still can." Fear gnawed at her, but she reminded herself why she was doing this: for her mother, for justice, and for the countless others who had suffered because of these criminals. Meanwhile, Rachel began piecing together the puzzle, cross-referencing Clara's findings with public records and conducting interviews with former employees and associates of the implicated individuals. What emerged was a chilling picture of greed and abuse of power. The mayor, Richard Alden, was at the center of it all, orchestrating illegal land deals and laundering money through shell companies. Other prominent figures, including a judge, a real estate developer, and even a police chief, were complicit in the scheme, using their positions to intimidate whistleblowers and cover their tracks. Rachel also uncovered evidence linking the conspiracy to several mysterious deaths over the years, including Evelyn Bennett's. It became clear that Clara's mother hadn't been the first victim, and if Clara didn't act fast, she might not be the last. With the story nearly ready to publish, Clara and Rachel agreed to meet in person one final time to review the evidence. They chose a quiet cafe in a neighboring town, far enough away to avoid prying eyes. As they sat huddled over coffee, Rachel handed Clara a printed draft of the exposé. Reading it, Clara felt a mix of emotions, pride, sorrow, and a fierce determination to see it through. "This is going to change everything," Rachel said quietly. "But once it's out there, there's no turning back. Are you ready for that?" Clara looked up, meeting Rachel's gaze. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life," she replied. The article went live the following morning, splashed across the front page of a major newspaper and shared widely online. Within hours, the town was in chaos. Residents gathered in shock and outrage as the extent of the corruption came to light. Arrest warrants were issued for Mayor Alden and several others named in the report. Reporters descended on the town, eager to interview anyone connected to the scandal. For Clara, the aftermath was surreal. Friends and neighbors who had once criticized her actions now approached her with apologies and gratitude. Even Sarah admitted she'd underestimated Clara's resolve. "You were right all along," Sarah said, hugging her tightly. "I'm so sorry I doubted you." But amidst the triumph, Clara couldn't forget the cost of seeking justice. Her mother's absence loomed larger than ever, a constant reminder of the sacrifices made along the way. Standing at Evelyn's graveside one evening, Clara placed fresh flowers on the headstone and whispered, "We did it, Mom. The truth is finally out." Though the battle was won, Clara knew the scars would remain. For her, for the town, and for everyone affected by the conspiracy. Yet as she walked away from the cemetery under a sky streaked with golden sunlight, she felt a flicker of peace. She had honored her mother's legacy and proven that courage, determination, and love could overcome even the darkest forces. The exposé published by Rachel Monroe sent shockwaves through the small town, unraveling years of secrets that had been buried under layers of power and deceit. The article painted a damning picture of corruption, greed, and betrayal, naming names and presenting irrefutable evidence gathered from Evelyn's meticulous records. For Clara, it was both a victory and a reckoning, a moment when justice finally began to take shape, but also when the full weight of her mother's sacrifice became painfully clear. Within hours of the story going live, law enforcement descended upon the town. Federal agents arrived to assist local authorities in executing arrest warrants for Mayor Richard Alden, Judge Harold Whitaker, real estate tycoon Victor Langston, and several others implicated in the conspiracy. Their arrests were met with mixed reactions. Some residents cheered openly, while others looked on in stunned silence, unable to believe that people they had trusted for so long could be capable of such crimes. Clara watched the news unfold from her living room, her emotions swirling like a storm. She felt relief knowing that those responsible would face consequences, but she couldn't shake the sadness that lingered beneath it all. Her mother should have been there to see this day, to witness the truth come to light. Instead, Evelyn had paid the ultimate price for daring to stand against injustice. As the initial chaos settled, Clara found herself thrust into the spotlight. Reporters called incessantly, asking for interviews and details about how she had uncovered the conspiracy. Neighbors who once whispered behind her back now praised her bravery, calling her a hero. While the attention was overwhelming, Clara handled it with quiet dignity, always steering the focus back to her mother. "This isn't my story," she told one journalist. "It's hers. Everything I did because of her." But not everyone celebrated the exposure of the scandal. Some powerful figures fought back fiercely, attempting to discredit Clara and Rachel's investigation. Lawyers hired by the accused argued that the evidence had been obtained illegally, pointing to the exhumation of Evelyn's grave as an example of improper conduct. Critics claimed the entire case rested on circumstantial proof and questioned whether Evelyn's journal entries could even be considered reliable testimony posthumously. Clara braced herself for legal challenges, knowing the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Yet she refused to let fear dictate her actions. With Rachel's help, she connected with civil rights attorneys who specialized in whistleblower cases. Together, they built a strong defense, emphasizing the public interest served by exposing corruption and arguing that the ends justified the means. Amidst the legal battles, Clara continued to dig deeper into the conspiracy, determined to leave no stone unturned. One name kept surfacing repeatedly in Evelyn's notes: Thomas Greaves, a reclusive businessman rumored to be the mastermind behind many of the illegal land deals. Unlike the others, Greaves had managed to evade arrest, disappearing entirely after the exposé broke. His absence raised red flags for Clara, who suspected he might still pose a threat. Determined to track him down, Clara revisited the documents stored in the metal chest. Among them, she discovered a property deed tied to Greaves, a remote cabin located deep in the woods outside of town. It seemed unlikely that anyone else knew about its existence, making it the perfect hiding spot. With Rachel's encouragement, Clara decided to investigate further, but cautiously. They agreed that involving law enforcement directly might tip off Greaves, giving him time to escape again. On a cold, overcast morning, Clara set out for the cabin armed with nothing more than her wits and a determination to see things through. The journey was treacherous, the narrow dirt road slick with mud from recent rains. As she approached the cabin, her car sputtered and died, forcing her to continue on foot. The isolation of the area only heightened her unease, every snapping twig and rustling leaf setting her nerves on edge. When she finally reached the cabin, she found it eerily quiet, its windows dark and curtains drawn. Steeling herself, Clara knocked firmly on the door. There was no answer. Slowly, she pushed it open, revealing a dim interior cluttered with dusty furniture and stacks of papers. On the far wall, a map of the town was pinned up, marked with red, circles highlighting key locations, properties targeted in the scheme, safe houses, and escape routes. Her heart raced as she sifted through the documents scattered across the table. Among them was a handwritten ledger detailing payments made to various accomplices, including sums earmarked for silencing potential threats. One entry stood out. EB, $50,000, declined. Beneath it was scrawled a single word: eliminate. Clara's breath caught in her throat. This was confirmation of what she'd suspected all along. Her mother hadn't simply been collateral damage. She had been deliberately targeted. Anger surged within her, mingling with grief and resolve. She snapped photos of the evidence, careful not to disturb anything that might aid investigators later. Just as she was about to leave, a noise startled her, a faint creak from upstairs. Her pulse quickened as she realized she wasn't alone. Before she could react, footsteps echoed down the staircase and Thomas Greaves appeared, his face pale and gaunt, his eyes hollow with desperation. "Well, well," he sneered, blocking her path. "Looks like little Miss Bennett decided to play detective." Clara froze, her mind racing. She had no weapon, no way to defend herself if he attacked. But then she remembered something her mother used to say. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's acting despite it. Summoning every ounce of strength, she held her ground. "You're done, Greaves," she said firmly, her voice steadier than she expected. "The whole world knows what you've done. Running won't save you." For a moment he hesitated, uncertainty flickering across his face. Then, without warning, he lunged at her. Clara dodged just in time, grabbing a heavy lamp from a nearby table and swinging it with all her might. It connected with a sickening thud, sending Greaves crumpling to the floor. Shaking but alive, Clara called the police, ensuring they arrived, swiftly to arrest Greaves. As officers led him away in handcuffs, she allowed herself a brief moment of triumph. Another piece of the puzzle had fallen into place, bringing her one step closer to closure. Back in town, the fallout from the scandal continued to ripple outward. Properties seized illegally were returned to their rightful owners, and funds embezzled over the years were traced and recovered. A special task force was formed to investigate other potential cases of corruption, signaling a new era of accountability. Yet, for Clara, the journey was far from over. Though justice had been served, she couldn't ignore the scars left behind, the fractured relationships, the lives destroyed, and the lingering sense of loss. Each night, as she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, she thought about her mother and the sacrifices she had made. Evelyn hadn't sought recognition or glory. She had acted out of love and a desire to protect her family and community. One evening, as twilight painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, Clara visited her mother's grave once more. She knelt beside the headstone, tracing the engraved letters with her fingertips. "Thank you, Mom," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "You were right about everything. And now, thanks to you, the truth is free." Though the wounds would take time to heal, Clara found solace in knowing that her mother's legacy lived on, not just in the justice achieved, but in the courage she had inspired in others. In the end, the fight hadn't been about vengeance or revenge. It had been about hope, resilience, and the belief that even in the darkest times, the truth could shine through. The months following the exposure of the conspiracy brought a mix of relief and reflection for Clara. The arrests of Mayor Richard Alden, Judge Harold Whitaker, Victor Langston, and Thomas Greaves marked the end of an era dominated by greed and corruption. But as the dust settled, the town was left grappling with the aftermath. Questions about how such a web of deceit had gone unnoticed for so long, and what steps could be taken to ensure it never happened again. For Clara, life began to return to some semblance of normalcy, though nothing felt quite the same. She no longer spent her days consumed by grief or fear. Instead, she focused on rebuilding, not just herself but also the community that had been fractured by years of exploitation. Many residents approached her with gratitude, sharing stories of how the scandal had given them back their land, their dignity, or their voice. Others simply thanked her for standing up when no one else would. Yet despite the praise and admiration, Clara remained humble. She knew the fight hadn't been hers alone. It had been her mother's first, and she had merely carried the torch. To honor Evelyn's memory, Clara decided to channel her energy into something positive. She founded a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping victims of fraud and corruption reclaim their rights. Named Evelyn's Light, the initiative provided legal support, counseling, and resources to those affected by similar schemes across the region. As word of the organization spread, donations poured in from people inspired by Clara's courage. Local businesses contributed funds while volunteers offered their time and expertise. Even Sarah, who had initially doubted Clara's mission, became one of its most passionate advocates, organizing fundraisers and awareness campaigns. Together, they worked tirelessly to turn tragedy into action, proving that even in the darkest moments, light could prevail. One day, while sorting through letters sent to the organization, Clara came across one that stood out. It was written by a young woman named Lily, whose family had lost their home due to forged documents and intimidation tactics orchestrated by the same group responsible for Evelyn's death. Thanks to the expose and subsequent investigations, Lily's family had regained ownership of their property. Her letter read, "Dear Clara, I don't know if you'll ever truly understand how much your bravery means to people like me. Because of you, my siblings and I have a place to call home again. You didn't just uncover the truth, you gave us hope. Thank you for being strong when we couldn't be. My mom says you're a real-life hero, and I believe her. With love, Lily." Clara folded the letter carefully, tears streaming down her face. For the first time in years, she felt a sense of peace, a quiet certainty that her mother's sacrifice hadn't been in vain. Evelyn's legacy wasn't just about exposing wrongdoing. It was about inspiring others to stand up for what was right, even when the odds seemed insurmountable. But Clara's journey wasn't without its challenges. The legal battles dragged on, with lawyers hired by the accused trying every tactic to delay justice. Some argued that the evidence gathered during Clara's investigation violated privacy laws, while others claimed the statute of limitations had expired on certain crimes. Despite these obstacles, Clara refused to give up. With Rachel Monroe's continued support, she testified at hearings, submitted affidavits, and rallied public opinion to keep pressure on the courts. During this time, Clara also discovered something unexpected among the documents recovered from the metal chest: a series of letters written by her grandfather, detailing a hidden fortune amassed by their ancestors. According to the letters, the money had been set aside for future generations, intended to protect the family from hardship. However, Evelyn had used part of it to fund her own investigation into the conspiracy, leaving behind instructions for Clara on how to access the remainder. At first, Clara wrestled with guilt over using the inheritance. Was it wrong to benefit from wealth accumulated under unclear circumstances? After much thought, she decided to donate the funds to Evelyn's Light, ensuring that her family's legacy would continue to serve a greater purpose. The decision brought her immense satisfaction, knowing that the money would help countless families rebuild their lives. As the trials concluded and sentences were handed down, the town slowly began to heal, New leaders emerged, committed to transparency and accountability. Town hall meetings became forums for open dialogue, where residents could voice concerns without fear of retaliation. A memorial was erected in the center of town, honoring those who had suffered because of the conspiracy, including Evelyn Bennett, whose name was etched prominently on the plaque. On the day of the memorial unveiling, Clara stood quietly among the crowd, listening as speakers recounted the events that had changed their lives forever. When it was her turn to speak, she stepped forward, clutching a single rose. Her voice trembled slightly as she addressed the gathering. Today we remember those who were silenced, not just my mother, but everyone who dared to question the powerful and paid the price. We remember their courage, their resilience, and their unwavering belief in justice. But more than anything, we celebrate the fact that their voices are finally being heard. This memorial isn't just a reminder of the past. It's a promise to the future. A promise that we will not let fear dictate our actions, that we will hold each other accountable, and that together, we can create a world where truth prevails. Her words were met with applause, followed by a moment of silence, as attendees placed flowers at the base of the monument. Clara lingered afterward, running her fingers over the engraved names. As she traced her mother's, she whispered softly, "You did it, Mom. Your fight is over now, and mine is too." In the weeks that followed, Clara allowed herself to embrace moments of joy she had denied herself for so long. She reconnected with old hobbies, spending afternoons painting landscapes inspired by the fields where she and her mother used to dream. She took long walks in the woods, finding comfort in nature's quiet beauty. And she opened her heart to new friendships, including Rachel, whose partnership had become a cornerstone of her journey. One crisp autumn morning, as golden leaves danced in the breeze, Clara visited the cabin where she had confronted Thomas Greaves. It had since been boarded up, awaiting demolition. Standing there, she felt a profound sense of closure, not just for herself but for her mother. The nightmare was over, and the town was beginning anew. Clara smiled faintly, turning her gaze toward the horizon. The road ahead wouldn't always be easy, but she faced it with renewed strength and purpose. She had learned that courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was the willingness to act despite it. And in doing so, she had proven that even the smallest spark could ignite a fire bright enough to burn away the shadows. As she walked away from the cabin, the sun breaking through the clouds, Clara felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Her mother's voice echoed softly in her mind, "Trust your instincts and don't let them scare you into silence." And for the first time in years, Clara knew she had done exactly that.